Hello and welcome back to another video tutorial here at Geekatplay Studios. My name's Gary Miller and I've got a fun, challenging little tutorial for us today about making sci-fi greebles. If you don't know what greebles are, I'm sure you've seen them, but you just may not have known of their funky name. Greebles are essentially all these little lines and these little objects, all these little details, say on the Millennium Falcon here, that help break up the flat surfaces of large objects, and they add a lot of intricate detail and shading possibilities to the model. So all these little things, all these panels, these vents, covers, and stuff, these are greebles. Another example would be, say, the Death Star in the first Star Wars movie. All these little intricate items, all these little looks like little models, these are all called greebles. And if you notice, they are all well randomly spaced, and it doesn't look like the creator of this took a rubber stamp and punched in a repeating manner the same model over and over and over and over and over again. What makes good greebles are a strong sense of randomness to it. And that's what we're going to set out to do today here in Hexagon. So to start off with, I'm going to come up here and create a grid in my 3D Primitives tab. I'm just going to create one box. I'm going to come over here to my Properties tab and I'm going to type in 40 and 40. I'm going to validate that, and it gives me a nice large grid with 40 squares by 40 squares. I'm going to turn this horizontal and bring it right up. Okay, so here's my grid, 40 squares by 40 squares. As I mentioned earlier, one of the keys to making a successful looking greeble is randomness. Well, unfortunately in View there is no function and no specific tool to randomly select whether it's points, edges, or faces of any particular object that you're working with. And what we want to do is, on this grid, we want to randomly select a large group of faces. Well, we could go about doing it, doing it manually and hope we get something that looks good, but it's either going to be very frustratingly slow or just a real pain in the neck. Well, I've come up with a decent way to create a realistic random selection of faces on here from which we can create our greebles. Before we do that, though, I want to create almost like a bunch of roads in my mesh. And the objective here, the goal, what I'm trying to do is, if you've ever seen a circuit board, it has all those lines of circuits that run throughout the top of the board. And also, if you look at like a sci-fi scene of a large city, it often has that type of layout effect where it looks like a circuit board type of arrangement of buildings and little doodads that create all that cool, intricate looking detail that we love to see in sci-fi images. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create some lines here, trying to subtly mimic what you see on a circuit board. There's no real pattern that I'm trying to achieve here, but rather something that's kind of random. And I think I'll do one right here. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to come up here to my Vertex Modeling tab, and I'm going to extract that. I'm going to name it Path, and I'm just going to hide it for now. So now we've got our paths that have been removed from our initial grid. With my Select Faces enabled, I'm going to come and hold down Control, hit my A button to select all my faces. I'm going to right click come down here to Advanced Selection. I'm going to click on Select 1 over N. Okay, with 1 over N selected, now what I want to do is I'm just going to spin my mouse wheel and arrive at any random number. What I don't want to do is arrive at a selection that creates obvious lines here in a selection. I want a selection like that. That's good. That's what I want. I'm going to extract that. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to come back up here to my original grid, Control A, select all those faces, right click, Advanced Selection, 1 over N, and I'm just going to spin around and arrive at another seemingly random number. And that looks good. Extract it. I'm going to hide that object. I'm going to come back to my grid, select all of them, right click, Advanced Selection, 1 over N, and I'm just going to keep doing this, because as we do this for about maybe 5 or 6 more times, we will create a nice pattern, random looking pattern from our object here. So I'm going to pause it right here and continue with this same process as I've been doing. Okay, so resuming where I left off, this is my grid pattern now with all these faces that have been removed, and I think we could clearly agree that that is a nice random looking pattern just by selecting all of them, right clicking, hitting Advanced Selection, and using the Select 1 over N tool. So now I'm going to hide my grid. I'm going to enable, say, about 3, 4. Those look pretty good. That looks good. I'm going to select, say, just this group of 4, and I'm going to weld them together. I'm going to hide that. I'm going to come and enable these 3. I'm going to weld them together. I'm going to hide that. And I'm going to select these remaining ones, and I'm going to group, and actually I'm not. I'm going to weld them all to this one. Okay, so now I've got that object, and my grid. That completes the whole thing minus the path. Okay, now we're ready to start creating our Greebles. What I want to do is make sure I have select faces. I'm going to hit Control A to select all of them. With Vertex Modeling tab selected, I'm going to come up here to Sweep Surface. And the function of the Sweep Surface tool I want is the axial function right here. And I'm just going to extrude downwards just a little bit. Just a little tiny bit. You might be tempted to make it really high, but just follow along here and you can create your own variations as you see fit. So I clicked there. Now I'm going to hit my space bar, which transfers the function of this tool over to the radial. And I'm going to come inward a little bit, just like that. I'm going to click. I'm going to hit my space bar 3 times, and now I'm going to extrude downwards again. Got to get this tool in a position where I can actually work with it. There we are. Okay, now I'm just going to extrude downwards just a little bit with a simple click right there. Okay, I'm happy with that. And once I hit validate, I got to wait a few moments for the program to calculate everything I just did. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to hide that. I'm going to enable the next one. Select faces, Control A to select all of them. Click on Sweep Surface. I'm going to enable the axial function of this tool, and this time I'm going to extrude upwards. Just a little bit, like that. Click. Hit my space bar to go to the radial function. Now when you start using the radial function, you get all this clustered geometry that's going on. If you follow my cursor, if you bring it down to about the lower left corner, you see, and zoom out a little bit, you'll be able to get this beast under control and tame it to where you can actually start using it. So I'm going to dial in an inner radius something like that. Click, OK, that's good. Hit my space bar to get to the axial function of this tool. Now I want to extrude up again, just a little bit like that. Hit my space bar, spin my mouse wheel to zoom out, get this tool under control. I'm going to come in, dial in a little bit smaller of an inner radius here than I did previously, and that looks pretty good. I'm going to click, hit my space bar 3 times, and this time I'm just going to extrude upwards one more time. Now, depending upon the look that you want, if you want to go for like a sci-fi city scene, you may want to extrude upwards higher than what I've done. Let's give this a few moments to calculate. There we are. I'm going to hide that one. I'm going to come back to my original grid, and I'm going to do the same thing. Select all, and I'm going to pause it right here for this to save some time, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are with the 3 objects that we were extruding from, and as you see, there is a great deal of randomness to the appearance of this. I'm going to disable them and come back to our path that we cut out at the beginning. What I want to do with this is come up to select edges. Now what I want to do is just select the sides of, this is almost like a sidewalk or a walkway. You can call it whatever you want. I really don't know what to call it, but I know what function it's going to provide for us, and it's going to help create some boundary, some sort of outline, maybe a pathway, a roadway, an elevated bridge, a transportation system. It almost looks like a circuit, gives it the appearance of like a circuit board. And I only need to create, select 2, the inside and the outside on each individual direction, I guess you could say, that this is going in. And if I miss one, it's not a big deal. We'll see it and we can come back and correct for it. Okay, I went up and hit my loop button, and now I have outlined this entire object here. Well, now what I want to do is I want to create an inner radius from this selection of edges. So I'm going to come up here to my edge tool, click on the first one here, and find the little tabs I have to use. I want to use this blue one that says extract around, and I want to come in and create an inner radius just like that. So this is now what the object looks like. Okay, I'm going to click off of that, and now I'm going to come back and make those same selections that I did earlier, only the outside edges of my object here. And again, if I miss one, we'll certainly find out when I go to loop it. That. Just these. I'm going to pause it right here, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've selected my outside edges. I'm going to come up here and loop it. Now I've got all my outside edges selected. I'm going to come up here to selection, and I'm going to convert that selection to faces. Now only the outside of faces of the pathways are selected. But this is not the selection I want. I want to select these inner ones. So I'm going to come up here and click on Invert Selection. Now the inside of my pathway is selected, and now I can extrude this. In order to get a sense of scale, I'm going to re-enable the other objects. Now I'm going to click on Sweep Surfaces, and I'm going to use the axial function, and I'm going to abort that. What I want to do is to create some randomness to this, so I'm just going to deselect some of these little corners here, and not only does it create a little bit of randomness to it, but I will also create this edge here as it gets extruded. So I'll be right back after I do this. Okay, I've just deselected a bunch of those little corners, and I will reselect my other objects that are hidden. And now I'm going to click on Sweep Surface, and I guess I have two options here. I can extrude downwards, but I think I'm going to extrude upwards just a little bit like that. Click, validate that, and now here is our greebled surface ready to be brought into view to be rendered. And I'm going to bring it into view, and I will join you on the other side. Okay, so here we are in hexagon, and our model currently has 4 objects that are assigned to it. Now the material I used is just the standard default sort of clamshell material that View often assigns to objects when you import it. And I set up my atmosphere. Let's render it and see what we have come up with. This is our render, just a quick basic one using the default texture, and as you see we've got a lot of randomness in its appearance, while at the same time preserving some sort of architectural structure in these pathways that we initially laid out at the beginning. It kind of has a little bit of a circuit board type of layout, but in between these pathways you've got a lot of randomness look to the buildings. And now if you do want to create a cityscape, a sci-fi cityscape, you would certainly want to go back, select some of these or many of these individual polygons and extrude them up higher to create more of a elevation change. But for say walls of a sci-fi corridor or a sci-fi city, this is a great and very fast and reliable technique to create nice little greebles on a flat surface. You can even use this and plant an ecosystem on it and sparsely populate some sci-fi buildings and use this as the pavement from which these larger buildings are planted. Here is another render I did earlier in creating this whole model earlier, and added a little variation to it. The possibilities are really endless, so just use your creativity. And that's it in this tutorial for creating sci-fi greebles here in Hexagon and rendering them in View. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you could benefit from it. And thanks for joining us here at Geekatplay Studios. My name's Gary Miller. Have a good day.